I think now's a really good point in time to actually to bring in some of our Kiwi examples, because you mentioned there that it's about going through an individual change on farm, and it's up to farmers to make the decision for what works for them, and whether the idea of regeneration is something they can get on board with, and then that flows through into system change. So I think maybe let's start with Miah. I know Miah is a dairy farmer. Introduce yourself. Kia ora.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Daniel. My name's Miah Smith, and I'm a dairy farmer just south of Rotorua. And we've been on this farm for 9 years now. And I've been dairy farming for 23 years, and conventionally dairy farming for most of that time, up until 5 years ago. So can everybody see that? That's what you see there is our farm was out of pine forestry, and that was probably 5 years before we bought the property. And I thought, with my background in conventional dairy farming, would come here, fix up the NPK, and then everything would be all good. And I soon found out that that was all good during winter and spring, but when it came to summertime, the ryegrass would sort of stop growing pretty quickly as soon as we got a bit of heat and dry spells, and it really dented on our profit. So I think it was 3 years into it, we put a lot of money into fertilizer, got our levels right, and the same thing was happening. And it took me that long really to dig a hole. I dug a hole and found that the ryegrass roots were sort of 3 or 4 inches deep, which is there's a lot of dairy farms like that, but on the steep contour with pumice soil, it just dried out and pretty much died, and we'd have to regrass a lot of it every year. So I started looking into how could I get deeper topsoil. I didn't know how to do that. How could I get my roots deeper? And that's, I was lucky enough to go to a barbecue one night, and there was this young hippie guy and his wife there, and he said, "Hey," I was talking to him about our farm and how I wanted to build topsoil, and I was putting a bit of compost on, and he said, "No, that's not how you do it, Miah. Come along and listen to this lady, Christine Jones, and she'll teach you about how to build topsoil." And he said she was an Australian. I thought, oh, how can a bloody Australian teach me about dairy farming in New Zealand? So I wasn't really keen to go, but they were quite persistent and took me along in the end. And just opened up my eyes to what I didn't know about soil. She was explaining how when you use a lot of synthetic fertilizers, it stops the relationship from the plant and the soil and the microbes working together, and that sort of, why would a plant want to receive minerals from microbes or give the microbes sugars in return if you're just piling on all this fertilizer? The grass just takes it up as it's available like that. And if you stop or reduce that and start growing a multi-species sort of pasture instead of ryegrass, you'll build that relationship and your biology will start humming, and that root and microbe relationship is how you actually build topsoil going down. So I came away from that day sort of blown away that I'd actually, after 20 years of dairy farming and all the courses I've done, never once had anyone taught me about biology. And that's probably the biggest hurdle for dairy farmers in New Zealand is there is no training or courses or anything that you ever get taught about biology. You never go and dig a hole. You never go and look at your soil structure. So I came away from that. I came home and I said to my wife, we're gonna start reducing our fertilizer and using biologicals. And she told me that it sounded like I'd joined a cult and wasn't very enthusiastic. So ended up doing a trial. This is our farm here. You can see it's quite steep. It's a tough farm, and 3 or 4 inches of topsoil dries out fast. So we started doing a trial with Agri, which is a seaweed company, and we thought we'd do a 3-year trial to see what happened. And we did 30 hectares. And the first year I thought, well, we stopped the nitrogen. Yeah, this is on the left is what we put in as in fertilizer, and we changed to 15 litres of each of their products. And that was split into 3 times a year. So we did this in the first year. We didn't grow much grass on that area. It was like a person who was addicted to crack coming off it. I didn't like it at all. The biology it was pretty obvious to me that it was dead. But in the second year, things started to get a bit better. The soil started working a bit, and I thought, oh yeah, this is it's looking a bit more possible. And we're doing a lot of if you can move to the next slide, we started doing a lot of we're doing root depth. So this is 3 years data, and we could see that where we stopped using fertilizer, the root depth sort of was just climbing up, and that's exactly what I wanted. So we're growing a little bit less grass in the springtime, but coming into summer and over summer, we had a lot better growth because the roots were obviously deeper, had more access. And then Christine Jones, next slide, thanks. And Christine Jones came back into the country and was talking about multi-species and why I've only got ryegrass. So we did. I brought 10 hectares worth of seed of a 14-way mix, and I think I ended up putting in 1.5 hectares because I was it's quite a mindset change. I don't even really know any other names of grasses apart from ryegrass. After 20 years of farming, I knew maybe fescue. So I didn't. When Christine was talking to me, I was like clueless on what sort of a mix I would do. So there's no education around grasses and herbs and clovers and that. So I made a mix and did it, and we got a massive response from it. That paddock was way different to the others, and this screen here is just showing really what was happening to the actual fertilizer levels. The green line's Agri, and the red lines is a control paddock where I carried on putting conventional fertilizer on. And the levels haven't really changed, and that's now 5 years, and they're still pretty similar. So that's biology just releasing what the plant needs. Yeah, can you carry on through there? Thanks. To the next one. These photos are of sort of root depth. This is after 3 years, so you can see we've doubled the root depth there, and also at this time after 3 years, magnesium had tripled in the pasture, in the actual pasture test we did, and calcium had doubled. pH had gone from 5.3 to 6 with no extra lime, which Christine did say that would happen, but I didn't believe her. So most things she said have come true. So I just listen to what she says now, and pretty onto it, and I'm lucky to have her as a mentor. Yeah, next one, thanks. So this is our first multi-species paddock. Probably one of our worst, toughest paddocks on the farm, because I was pretty standoffish to even go away from ryegrass at the time. So this is about 25 days regrowth, and this paddock hasn't had any synthetics on it for 3 years. So Christine came here and said, why don't you let it grow a bit longer? Because you'll be catching more sun. The more sun you catch with the bigger leaves, the more you're going to feed your biology, the deeper your roots, and this is going to start the nutrient cycling and the carbon sequestration deeper down. So that's what I did. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm hoping it's the right one. This is I put this photo in just to show the interest of farmers in New Zealand. So we had an open day 3 years ago, and we had 100 farmers turn up, which was quite cool. And the next slide is in that multi-species paddock, just the colour of the soil changed in 18 months to really dark. And on this country, there was nothing like it on the whole farm. And the day we went in there with Christine, I think I dug about 50 holes all over that paddock, and everyone was telling me to stop, but I couldn't actually believe it. So that was pretty much when we started to just do the whole farm. So if you move on to the next screen. You can see here, earlier on you saw, half of that with roots with 15 centimetres. Now in this multi-species paddock with the deeper rooted species and that, we were getting below 30 centimetres, down to about 45 even in places. And then I started leaving it the round length a bit longer. So this is 40 days, and the cows come in here and just absolutely love it. So we did that, and the cows milk really well off this stuff. They went up, and because I'm into trialing new stuff now, I thought, next round I'll leave it 50 days, which is the next slide. And there's my wife Jenny in it, so you can see it's getting longer. And conventionally, I would say that the cows are going to crash. If that was ryegrass, the milk production would crash, and you'd be quite upset. But I put the cows in there, and yeah, they no problem. The milk stayed high, and then so the next grazing, I thought I'll leave it even longer, just to see what happens. So the next slide is 60 days. So that's me in there. That's everything's gone to flour now. So this is kind of like deferred grazing, what we call it in New Zealand. I'd never done anything like this before, but I thought it was pretty cool now. All my neighbours probably thought I was absolutely mad, which is good. And we put the cows in here, and they still milk off this sort of tucker. So at this stage, I was because obviously we want to be resilient through summer. If I can be on a 60-day round or an 80-day round, I know I can get through a couple of dry months. The problem with doing this over your whole farm is once a plant goes to seed, it stops feeding the biology, and all the energy goes to the seed. So what we do now is we keep part of the farm in a quicker round and keep that vegetative, and then we shut up 15 to 20% like this, and then if we get dry, we start coming into this and then back. So we've still got we're still feeding the soil on quite a large platform. And when we come and eat this, we lay down a lot of litter and there's a lot of cover. So the soil's still quite moist. Yeah. Next slide. We've also, this is the cows in there. So this is half the size of our normal paddock. Normally it's about 3 hectares our paddocks are. The cows couldn't eat, even though it's half the size, they just couldn't eat anywhere near it. So this paddock's probably only ever grown in a whole 12 months, would have grown this amount of grass. And we did it in 60 days, so without fertilizer. So that sort of blew my mind. And that gets me excited to know that, going forward, we can do this over the whole farm. We've just noticed in the last, because this is our 3rd season now, what we're in now. So we're seeing our animal health is, our costs are very low now. We don't have sick animals very often. Last year we got the vet out twice for 550 cows. Not many dairy farmers can say that. This calving we had 2 or 3 cows with metabolic problems, where on conventional farms, and not just this one, but in my previous career, some farms you'd have 10% of your cows go down and you'd have to administer calcium, magnesium to get them back up, and often have deaths and ongoing problems from that. So we're not getting that anymore. We used to have real problems here. Cows getting in calf. We have gone on to once a day milking, and that's for a lifestyle reason, really. When you get into regenerative farming, you actually realise you're not why you're actually doing the job or why you're farming now. We've sort of lost our passion a little bit with the way we were doing it in the past. So it was a real eye opener, that the whole holistic view of how farming should be, and I think dairying in New Zealand has lost that. It's all about production and really, if you're making a good profit, which we are, and you've got time for your family, your cows are happy and healthy, the environment is better. I don't see why more people won't get into it. So I think, is that the end of it?
Miah, that's great. Thank you, mate. That's awesome. A lot of the feedback we had before was we need to stop using like big terms like holistic and stuff we don't understand. People literally said on Twitter, show me pictures, show me graphs, keep it real practical. That's exactly what we're after, mate. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really indicative journey of what regeneration and regenerative transition on farm can look like. So thank you. I really appreciate that.